So a lot of barbs were traded on Wednesday night, but the real question is who won the debate? Was there a clear winner? Former House Speaker and Fox News political analyst Newt Gingrich joins us now. It's great to have you with us, sir, and I'm curious to get your take on it. Did anybody stand out to you, or do you walk away from this and say Donald Trump is still going to hold his lead?
Well, I think it's clear, if you watch the debate, that none of them are in the same ability as Trump. I think you're going to see the same thing in California, where apparently there are literally thousands and thousands of people coming out to see Trump at the Republican state convention. My view is that the debates should be over. Trump is clearly going to be the nominee. He is ahead, I think, by 43 points over DeSantis, who's second. And DeSantis is like at 14, and Trump's at about at 57. And I think what we ought to do as a party is focus right now on the whole question of how do we defeat Biden, or how do we defeat Newsom if he ends up being the Democratic nominee. I'm not totally convinced anymore that Biden is going to get to the nomination. So I think Republicans ought to recognize that it's no longer useful to us to continue fighting because we have a nominee in Donald Trump. It's totally implausible that he is not going to be the nominee. He's ahead in every single state. He has an organization in every single state. Nobody else can match him. And in two debates, nobody had any real effect on the polls.
So I actually want to follow up on a point that you just made, Newt, that potentially President Biden may not be the nominee. You know, we've got a ways to go until the election. What, though, from a process standpoint, would have to happen? You know, are we closing in on a timeline where it might be too late for the Democratic Party to choose someone else if President Biden were to step down?
No, it's never too late. I mean, the question is, how much more can Biden decay in terms of forgetting his place and what he's saying, making the kind of mistakes you really wonder, you know, what's exactly going on. There are a lot of things like that you have to think about. How much worse can the economy get? The fact is that for most Americans, the inflation is real. It affects their gasoline. It affects food. And so you have to ask yourself the question, if, you know, in the Washington Post poll on Sunday, 62% of Democrats said they wanted somebody other than Biden. And in the NBC poll the same day, 59% of Democrats said they wanted somebody other than Biden. Well, in a free society, despite the Biden administration's efforts to keep people legally off the ballot, whether it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or no labels or Donald Trump, in the end, you can't have 59% of your own party disliking you and wanting you off the ballot and think you're going to be renominated.
Wow. Sir, let me switch gears with you and talk about the shutdown, if I could. The last time I remember a budget that made sense, it was under you as Speaker. That is the last time I have a good memory of a federal budget.
You have a good memory.
Where are we right now? Because, you know, we hear so much talk, shutdown, not shutdown. You know this process better than anyone. Where are we, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the American people are very clear. We run a project called America's New Majority Project, which people can see at a website by that name. And if you go look at America's New Majority Project, we just did a survey. 71% of American people want to cut spending. 55% want to cut spending bad enough that even if it takes a shutdown, they would accept that to get to a spending cut, because they see spending relating to inflation and to balancing the budget. Furthermore, the Senate proposal that would fund $6 billion for Ukraine and not one penny for the border, I think the average American would think that that's crazy. We haven't polled it, but my guess is that's probably 80 or 90% disapproval. So the question is, do the American people matter? Kevin McCarthy, who has a much harder job than I did. I mean, nobody should be confused. When I was Speaker, I had a 230 vote majority the first time. I had a 236 vote majority the second time. He's got about a 5 vote majority.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that's...
You know, a couple of those people really dislike him. He's finding a way to put that together to offer a conservative alternative to the Senate, which basically has passed a Biden budget, or has Republicans agreeing to a Biden budget. No changes except money for Ukraine. No cuts in spending. Nothing for the border. I think Kevin's got to find the last 3 or 4 votes. Now, it was encouraging that yesterday they passed 3 bills on the House with a bipartisan majority. And I think that was a positive step in the right direction.
Newt, since Brian brought up sort of the golden age of the late 90s and the way the budget was balanced, I'm also going to bring up your experience with impeachment as well. And I'm referring to Bill Clinton. It was really historic at that time. It's sort of losing some of its potency as we move forward. And we saw what happened to Donald Trump. But having said that, the inquiry got underway. And if you connect the dots, you really can make a case that there seems to be enough evidence that would indicate, certainly, at least at the very least, that President Biden lied many times that when he said that he had no knowledge at all of his son's overseas business dealings. Maybe there's something even more there. Obviously, the House committees are digging into that. They're trying to find the smoking gun. What do they need to convince you that an inquiry should be on the table here? You know, a legit impeachment.
Look, I think you asked exactly the right question. There's no question in my mind that, and I talked to Chairman Comer a couple of hours ago, there's no question in my mind that they absolutely got to move to an inquiry. When you discover, for example, that a $250,000 check showed up at Joe Biden's house, not Hunter, at a time when Hunter was actually in Los Angeles, and it came from Communist China. It's legitimate to say, gee, what's going on here? By the way, by comparison with the Democrat that everybody wants to resign, $250,000 would actually have been 4 gold bars. So if we want to use the Menendez standard, just that one incident is 4 gold bars.
Right.
There are enough questions about, there are enough questions about Biden, remember what we're talking about. We're talking about Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Russia, Romania, and Communist China. I mean, how can you have a vice president who has ties to all of those? He went to dinner at Cafe Milano with businessmen. He dealt with the Chinese communists. He wrote a letter of recommendation for the son of one of the Chinese business guys. I mean, for him to have lied to the country, well, it's politics. It's not necessarily criminal. But it certainly tells you that there's enough there that we ought to have an inquiry. And then it's up to the American people.
Right.
If the American people conclude he's got to, but they're going to be very cautious about getting rid of him, because the alternative is Kamala Harris.
Right. That's a great point.
She's less popular than he is.
Newt, all great points, and we so appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you.